welcome to My Stable Relationship, an equestrian performance podcast where we will deep dive into the mindset and management challenges of ourselves and of our peers. Our discussions will allow you to learn from experts, encourage you to set audacious goals, overcome challenges, and develop actionable plans. Ready? Let's do this. Hello everyone, and welcome back to My Stable Relationship. So a quick announcement and an update before we get into the topic today. During July, I was giving away intro coaching sessions, and I said last week I really loved meeting everyone who signed up and all the goals and action items that we got to set and really seeing you take some of those first steps. It's really what performance coaching is all about, and it was super fabulous to see you take advantage of that. And because the feedback was so positive and most of you said you wanted more, I've actually come up with a compromise. It's not quite coaching, but it is an opportunity to speak with me about possible coaching going forward. So on my calendar, the link will be in the show notes. I've booked some discovery call slots. And these are perfect for you if you have ever wondered if performance coaching, sports psychology, life coaching, or NLP could help you reach your goals, or if classical dressage could be the path to help you rehabilitate or train your horse. So if that sounds like something you just like to have a chat about, then this discovery call is perfect for you. So you can think of it like a meet and greet. It's an opportunity for us to discuss your current circumstances, answer any questions you might have, and for you to decide whether performance or equestrian coaching is right for you. Again, you can book one of these discovery calls onto my calendar directly. I will put the link to my calendar in the show notes, or you can contact me via Instagram, Facebook, or my website, and I will send you the link. Now, my other announcement is that I have started organizing some incredible podcast guests to come on over the next couple of months. And we are currently going through and picking mindset topics at the moment, and we are organizing them and recording them, and they are just unbelievable. You are going to be hearing from some former competitive athletes, some equestrian coaches, equestrian professionals, and some other mindset coaches. And the topics that they are bringing and they are suggesting are just so unbelievably amazing. I am so excited. They are going to be so incredible, so juicy, and you are going to be able to take away so much from them in order to support you in your equestrian pursuits and in life more broadly. And as a disclaimer, you might even hear some mindset lessons learned from my partner, because it turns out you can be an engineer and launch satellites into space and still need someone to help you test, run, and work out these online meeting platforms and how these recordings work. So he's been a good sport, but he actually had a really fabulous mindset topic for us as well. So over the next month or so, you will start to hear from some of these people. Please stay tuned. And for this week's learning, I really wanted to tell you about one of my recent lessons with one of my instructors and what they reminded me on Monday. So at the moment, I'm doing a classical dressage instructor qualification, straightness training for anyone who has heard of it before. And we have nearly weekly lessons of different types with our instructors. And this month I was stepping back into Rio with his groundwork. We were kind of stepping it up a notch. So we were starting to think about how we bring his position from a forward down state to more of a horizontal balance, or how we use the lateral movements to build him up from behind to front. And you can really see him start to get this gorgeous lift through the withers and really start to develop his tempo and his rhythm and really start to carry himself. So it's been fabulous learning. But I submitted this video and then we jump on Zoom together and I get this lesson, right? And I had to go back several times and rewatch it. And I'll tell you why, but let me summarize these lessons that I took away for you. So number one, this is the main reason, we all interpret circumstances differently based on our thoughts and feelings. And yes, we've been over that a couple of times in our previous episodes, but how we interpret the circumstance is biased by our belief systems or our worldviews. How we interpret the circumstance is biased by our belief system or our worldview. And here's what I mean. So at the start of my lesson, she said it was a really great performance and that Rio and I are super aligned, confident, and that we perform the lateral movements really beautifully. And that is literally where my brain stopped listening. And it's my old habit again, where my brain is striving to do it right, to be the best, and to be the winner. And once I heard that sentence from her mouth, it basically made me the winner. And I didn't really absorb the rest of the lesson. And that's just me, but perhaps your brain is biased towards the negative and is maybe always trying to seek to prove that you are doing the wrong thing. So instead of hearing anything that you did well, your brain is probably seeking any sort of feedback that says that you need to improve, that translates into you doing things wrong, failing, being useless, whatever your bias is. It's just something interesting to note and something interesting to be aware of, that you are translating that circumstance. And in this case, translating the feedback. Number two, I knew that this had happened and I had to go back and watch this lesson several times on replay. And so the second point is just exactly that. It's a reminder that I still have a tendency to strive for perfection. Intellectually, I know that perfectionism isn't really a thing, but in practice, I can see that I am still seeking it, even when I'm working with the horses. And there is certainly a balance to be struck here, but my additional feedback, once I was actually able to hear and process the rest of it, thank you, brain, the rest of my feedback was to not be so perfect or so posed all the time, and to feel the freedom in all kinds of positions, to not strive for perfectionism, but rather for effectiveness, to allow the spark by doing things wrong and then finding the balance, and to really allow the art of the training to come in rather than what I was doing, which was trying to get it right. And I just think this is a really beautiful lesson, not just applicable to me doing classical dressage, right? But applicable to all of you with your horses and applicable to instances in our daily lives. And with that, let's chat about our topic today. So last week we spoke about whether or not you are running away from your circumstances. And it occurred to me that we should really speak about what is and what is not in your control, or what is in and what is out of your control. And what I mean by control is that it's what you have ability to change or choose. And it's tough because the word control has been used for lots of different things. We use it in a management sense, a supervision sense, being accountable, being responsible. But really, all I'm talking to you about in this episode is when you are faced with a circumstance, what is in your control are the things that you have the ability to change or to choose. So I want to run through some examples, but firstly, I want to say that, like everything we talk about, nothing is black or white, and this all depends. So it depends on you and on your circumstance. So if two people are faced with the same circumstance, what is in one person's control may not be in the other person's control. So just bearing that in mind, I'm going to give you some general examples of things that may be in your control. So there are the obvious ones, right? There are your thoughts, feelings, actions, and results are in your control. Your goals, your dreams, your aspirations, your scheduling and your planning is in your control. Your hobbies, your discipline of choice in your equestrian pursuits, how you dress, what you eat, what you say or do, how you treat people, how you treat your horse is in your control. What you focus your attention or energy on is in your control. Your self-care, when you ask for help, who you follow, who you surround yourself with, are all in your control. And I know that the primitive brains inside of you are starting to say, but I disagree. And I just want you to stick with me because we will go through some examples, but I need you to just believe me. Those types of things are usually in your control. Things that are outside of your control are things like the past. Other people are outside of your control. Other people's thoughts, feelings, actions, results, body language, energy, worldviews, opinions, and what they say or what they do is outside of your control. Unforeseen events or weather are out of your control. Aging, illness, injury, accidents, tragedies are all out of your control. Current law, legislation, policy, at the current time, it is what it is out of your control. Now again, I can hear your brain nearly ticking over, trying to find reasons why that is in your control. But that doesn't mean you can't take actions to try to have it adapted. But what I'm saying is, in the current state, it is out of your control. Here's some more difficult ones. Your horse's actions in the paddock, the stable, the vet surgery, the competition ring, on a trail ride are out of your control. It does not matter if you are there to monitor him or not. Your horse has his own brain. Another hard one, the warm-up ring is out of your control. And the last one I want to share with you is that your initial or your first thought is often out of your control unless you have done extensive mindset work, because often it's a reaction as opposed to a response. So your initial or first thought may be out of your control. And these aren't exhaustive lists, right? There will be different things to add or subtract depending on the circumstance in question. And I can hear the but for each of them, where your brain says, it's having trouble with these two concepts. And you might be sitting there disagreeing with me or trying to argue the toss. And you are allowed to do that. But I want you to be open enough to listening to the following examples with the key takeaway that it depends on the specific circumstance. Like I said before, when we look at two people, same circumstance, one might find something that is in their control, and one might find something, the same thing, and it'll be out of their control. Let's do some horsey type examples here. So let's talk about the weather. You're going to a horse show and it is going to rain all weekend. The weather is not in your control. But what is in your control is what you think about that weather. If you think your horse will have a problem or not is in your control. The decision to actually go to the horse show, knowing that the weather isn't going to be good, is in your control. The choice of which classes you put your horse in or which heights you jump in the bad weather is all in your control, just not the weather. So that one's a fairly easy one to understand. We're going to start getting a bit more difficult now. Let's talk about horse food bills. So what is in your control is the ability to search around for better prices at different companies. You can choose not to pay, and you can choose to pay. You can actually choose not to pay even once it's delivered. It's just not really considered appropriate. What's not in your control is the price that the company is going to charge you. What's not in your control is when they charge you, when they deliver the feed, or any of their actions. And now I know at this point you're saying, yes, but I can control when they charge me. I've asked them to bill me every fortnight and deliver every fortnight. That's what my feed people do for me. But unfortunately, what I've recently experienced is that things go wrong. They change their system. They charge you a day earlier. They don't deliver for 2 days longer than you thought they would be there. And really, just because there is an agreement that they will deliver on a certain day does not mean that that is in your control. It just means that you have minimized the risk of something happening that you didn't want to happen. I want my feed delivered on a Thursday. When it's delivered on a Saturday, I have to go and pick up extra in town. Now, me agreeing with my feed company to deliver on a Thursday is not me controlling them. Things still go wrong and there are still Thursdays where they don't deliver. It's not in my control. But again, it's just me minimizing the risk of something that I don't want to happen. Let's get even more tricky. Let's go to dogs. Most of us as horse people, I'm sure, have also been around dogs quite a long time. So if you have a dog and you ask them to sit, it is not because you are in control of the dog that they sit. The dog has their own brain. And if you've been training them for a while, you know that the behavior of sitting will either be reinforced or if they don't sit, they might be punished, depending on how you train. Again, This makes us feel like we're in control because when we say the word sit, the outcome is that the dog normally sits down, right? The truth is that we are not in control. The dog has chosen to listen to our instruction. Otherwise, they may have had to suffer through the consequences. What we can control is our body language, our sit cue, our voice, how many times we've conditioned the voice cue with our dog, what the reward or the punishment will be, how many times we are willing to ask before reinforcing or following through, what our thoughts are when our dog does do a sit on cue, what our thoughts are when our dog doesn't do a sit on cue, and how that makes us feel. All of that is within our control. But the choice to actually do the sitting down is not within our control. Tough one, hey. Let's look at our horses. Similar to our dogs, our horses are not really in our control. We can do things to set boundaries and try and minimize risks. But at the end of the day, your horse has his own brain. So for example, and this is a topical one for me because Rio injured himself and ended his career in the paddock. Your horse's actions in the paddock, whether or not you were there, are his own. You can make that paddock as safe or as pleasing as you want. And that's all about minimizing risk. So you can set up good fences, create boundaries, you can remove the rocks, you can lop the trees, whatever. But I assure you that if that horse feels the need to escape from that paddock, he will try his absolute best, despite it being against what you wanted. In training with our horses, it's similar to the dog. We can set boundaries, we can minimize risk, we can communicate, we can give aids and cues, we can teach them our body language. But if that horse feels the need to leave that arena, he will leave. You cannot hold him down. He is too big for that. You are not in control. That is why a partnership is a better word for what we're doing when we're in training. What is in your control is those interactions with your horse, the body language, the voice cues, the energy, your aids, and then it becomes your job to communicate to him that it is more pleasant to stay with you or within your boundaries. And again, it gives us this feeling of being in control, but we are not because our partner has their own brain. And again, if they feel the need to leave, they're going to leave. And when I told someone this the other day, they said, unless you strap them down. And I tell you what, I'm not even going to go there as a discussion because it's not our style on this podcast. So let's talk about people then. Other people are not in our control. So I had this great example that I remembered when I was first starting to compete Rio, and we were out at a show jumping event and we were in the warm-up ring. And the warm-up ring was always a problem for us because he was very, very horse shy. So any horses that came towards him, he would shy sideways, tense up, spin, rear, whatever. And it went on for quite a while. But it also meant that he was quite spooky and tense about everything else around the warm-up ring. So this one time out at this show, there was a woman with a pram and a baby on the side of the warm-up ring. And I decided that my solution was to ask her to move the pram away from the edge of the ring so that Rio didn't have to spook at it. Now, in this instance, she did actually move the pram. But that didn't mean that I was in control of what she did. She moved that pram out of the goodness of her heart because her thoughts were probably something along the line of being able to help me, and she could see that my horse was having a difficult time, and she could help me by moving. But what if her thoughts had been, too bad, so sad, I'm not moving, I don't want to move, and then she didn't move the pram? At that point, I would have really been able to see that the warm-up ring edges were not in my control. And my show jumping instructor actually saw me in this instance do this. And he reminded me of this for years. And he would always say to me, focus on your horse, how you're riding, how you're feeling, what your jobs are in the ring, not on prams on the outside of the ring, the things outside of my control. And the last one I have for you to think about is your children. So we think that we are in control of our children. And the really bad news is that we are not. Again, we are not in control of anyone else. What actually happens, right, is that we establish a rule. It is still our child's choice whether or not they abide by the rule, which clearly means we are not in control of them. Yes, sometimes they will abide by the rule, and this gives us that illusion again of being in control. But if they don't abide by our rule, we feel like we've lost control. And the truth is that we had never been in control anyway. It was just how our child chose to respond to the rule all along. They will do the assessment for themselves of the rule and the consequence of abiding versus not abiding by the rule. It's interesting, hey? So again, I've given you some fairly interesting circumstances to think about here in terms of being in control or not in control. And I know this might raise a few issues for some people, and you may or may not agree with me, and that's okay. I just want you to remember again, this depends and is different for everyone. Again, in the same circumstance, what is in and out of someone's control will depend on them, their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions. And what's really interesting about this difference between these two people in the same circumstance is that they need to watch that they are not on autopilot or victim mode, where they might not be seeing all of the control options available to them, and rather that they are being mindful, in which case they are more likely to be taking on board a lot more responsibility over the things in their control. It's this little bit open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness. And our solutions grow bigger and we get more solutions available to us in that open-minded state. And it's really important to be able to identify things that are in our control versus out of our control. It's important because, number one, I want you to be empowered to employ the full scope of what you can control. I don't want you to be in autopilot or victim mode, only seeing little bits of the problem and feeling like you have no autonomy over it, no control over it. This is a little bit an extension of the concept I presented to you last week. Think of it like a little bit of the next step of information. So, believing that you have no control over any aspect of the circumstance can create even more anxiety, stress, worry, or overwhelm. The really advanced work that I'm giving you here now is that we actually need to be able to break apart the circumstance, decide which aspects are in your control and which are not. Some people will say, and I'm sure you've heard this before, they will say, let go of what you can't control and focus on what you can. And that's a really good rule of thumb, but I want you to know that it is just that. It is a rule of thumb and it's not really deep enough. So the thing is that you can choose to see things in or out of your control and pursue them based on that. The other reason we need to be able to identify things that are out of our control or in our control are so that we don't expend energy, anxiety, stress, worry on things outside of your control, unless you choose to. But I need you to understand where you can and cannot make a difference so that we can more properly focus your energy. And there is a next step here as well, which is that just because something is within your control still does not mean that it is important enough to expend energy on. Just because something is within your control does not mean that it is important enough to expend energy on. You need to do the next step as well, which is finding the overlap between things that matter and things that you can control. And that's a whole future episode in itself. But I just want you to be aware that once you've got in your hands holding all the things in your control, you might still want to put some down. It's kind of like in the circus with those spinning plates. I could give you 50 plates, but I guarantee you can probably only spin 3 to 10. So you still have to make a choice. Those 50 plates might be in your control, but you still might have to make a choice to put down 40 of them. And that's okay. And we will do a future episode on that. So let's talk about how to identify what is and what is not in our control. Your actionable takeaway from today is another exercise to do just that. So I want you to, step one, just choose one circumstance that you're focused on. Step two, I want you to actually get a piece of paper and I want you to draw a big circle in the center of it. Now, thinking about that circumstance, anything that you think is in your control, I want you to write into the middle of the circle. Anything that you think is outside of your control about that circumstance goes outside of the circle on the piece of paper. Think of this as like a controlled brainstorm. But I don't want you to be too generic. I really need you to break this down and break it apart. And what I mean by that is I really want you to deep dive into the circumstance. So if your circumstance is that you knocked a rail in the show jumping round, I don't want you to write me in the control circle and the horse on the outside of the circle. That is very surface level. I want you to go deeper than that. On the inside of the circle, using that same example, I want to see things like your thoughts and your feelings, specific ones that you were having at the time that you knocked the rail or in that round. I want to see things like you could sit up straight, put your heels down, shoulders back. You could count strides. You could focus on your breathing. You could soften your hands. All of that was in your control. Perhaps there were things in your control before and after the round as well that you could put into your circle. So a shorter warm up, a walk around the ground first. Just have a really deep think about what was truly in your control. And then in the outside of your control section, maybe there were screaming kids in the audience, or maybe the ground was really wet, or maybe there was a white top rail with a white banner in the background. I kid you not, I have done a round like that before, and even I could not see that pole as we came towards it. But whatever it was, make it really, really clear. Make it really, really deep and detailed. Now, this only works if you have the time and the space to undertake a full brain dump. But sometimes you will find yourself in a circumstance and you need to make a decision quickly about what is and isn't in your control. And I find a quick question helps me in that time. So all I ask myself is, what can I do about this? My brain will then get to work answering that single question, thinking of all the options that I have at that current moment. So I want you to keep asking yourself that over and over because your brain needs to stay on track. What can I do about this? Answer. What can I do about this? Answer. And that should get you through the current situation. These are really beautiful exercises too, because from here we can extend it to determine where you could actually regain some additional control from the parts which were outside of your control to start with. We can set some action items, we can plan for next time. For example, like on that show jumping around one, if you knew the grounds were going to be wet, maybe that's not outside of your control anymore. Maybe it's time that we got studded shoes for your horse, or we dropped the class height to make it safer for the horse, or we didn't go to that show, we prepped and planned for a next one instead. The point is that we can start to overcome, or we could move around some of those out of control obstacles. But that is our future work. Let's just start with the actionable takeaways and work out what is in and out of control about your situation currently. Please reach out to me via DM or PM at Journey of Equine on the socials, and I am more than happy to give you my thoughts on your circumstance that you've picked. And if you would like to take this work further, then it is time to go to my calendar and sign up for one of the new discovery calls. You can book directly into my calendar, or you can message me through my website or on social media, and I will send you the link. Now, we all know that mindset impacts our horse training. Our horses pick up on our emotions and our feelings so easily. My goal with this podcast is to use this type of mindset and management work to help you more effectively rehabilitate or train your horse. We will balance your life inside and outside of the arena so that you can find your version of a stable relationship. And with that, I just want to say thank you for tuning in today. Please subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you're listening on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes, particularly with our fabulous guests starting to record with me. You can also follow along on the socials at Journey of Equine. The links are in the show notes. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I will speak to you soon. Thank you so much for listening. My goal is to help you more effectively train or rehabilitate your horse by focusing on your mindset and management, both inside and outside of the arena. If this sounds like something you'd like one-on-one help with, or if you'd like to follow along for more, come and join me on Instagram or Facebook @Journey of Equine. The links will be in the show notes. Have a great week, everyone.